All right, so let's talk about this auto action details form. So up at the top here is just kind of the name and the basic details about the auto action itself. So a couple things that I want to say here is the name is up to you what you call it. I tend to create a sort of naming scheme that helps me identify and helps other users who are going to really be using the auto actions that I might create in their site, helps them identify them just by name. So I use things in relation to the part of the process that we're talking about in that auto action. But again, it's really up to you. In that section, if there is a memo, the memo will also show up. I really recommend adding memos because yes, you understand it today, but if especially this auto action happens to be a series, part of a series of auto actions that are going to trigger, users who may come after you or have to update it may not really understand what's going on. Like, what was the purpose of you creating this? We can read through what the auto action is doing, but we don't know, we may not understand why it's being set up. So that being said, I think that's also an important part. It tells us whether it's enabled or not. And then execute more than once per record is an option for the auto action that will limit it to happening one single time or anytime it happens to be triggered. So an example would be when the inquiry receive date is updated, we're going to send the email to the family. We really don't want that to be executed more than once, because if we maybe had a data entry error, right? We just got the wrong years right around January. We're often going to be having that issue, right? When we're so used to entering 2020 that when we get to 2021, we might just have a data entry error, and we don't really want that email to be sent out to the family again. So we really want that to happen one time, and then it goes. However, some auto actions like an expiration for a background check are so important to get done, or to have updated documents for other expiring documents like a driver's license or a passport or something of that nature. Having those emails go out every week until there's receipt of those documents, that is a great example of when we do want it to execute more than once, because we really want to remind our team or the end user, like our family, our client, to get this done because this is important for record keeping. The next section down in here is the trigger. And this is going to be pointed towards the specific field that is triggered. It might be on it might just show the table. We'll kind of look at it, but it's what is it, what's triggering. If it is a scheduled auto action, it will show the schedule weekly. On Mondays, the next scheduled due date is, whatever, December 6th, something like that, whatever next Monday is, right? It'll show you the specific date and time. The filters here, I do believe for an update, you will have to have a filter. You probably have to have a filter for everything, really, because this is what's going to tell Sam why I would, yes, that field's been entered, but what about that field? What sort of value does that field have to have in order for this to trigger? So by default, when you choose a trigger being a specific field, the filter will be set as that field, right, is not empty. But we could change this to say that field, that date is greater than January 2021, so that we get a different process happening at that point in time rather than what's happening today. Um, we might have multiple filters in here as well. So saying when the inquiry receive date is not empty and the family is interested in domestic adoption or foster care versus international adoption. When they're interested in domestic or foster care, we're going to go to Sally. When it's international, we're going to Dan, right? Like being able to separate who the communication goes to by adding additional filters, or what's going to happen should there be different filters on here. And then there's the action. So the action is going to tell us it's going to update a field, like it's going to update the case stage, and it's going to insert the inquiry coordinator, and it's going to I don't know, that's enough for me to come up with as far as if it were the action word update field. But it's showing what is it going to do. In this case, it's sending an email. It does have email details presented here, which of course these things will not be shown to you when it's an update of a field, but you'll see the different fields. And so we'll start to go through that in a moment. My last slide, I'm pretty sure, before we just jump into starting to build a few auto actions, is I think it's always important for you to know your process. Knowing your process is going to help you identify really common areas where it's going to make a lot of sense to go ahead and set up emails and have that ready. So the beginning and the end of these stages, right? So anytime you're transitioning a process, I gave the example, gosh, let me think of it. Last night, or yesterday afternoon when I was talking to a client about we're going to make dinner. We're going to make dinner, and you sort of like let your family know, hey, I'm about to go make dinner. When the dinner is ready, you also let them know it's ready. It's time to come eat. So you've communicated with the family that you're going out of the family room to go cook, and then everyone should leave the family room. It's now time to eat, right? Those are good that's the beginning of that cooking the dinner process, and the end that are great times for communication. So as far as emails go, I think when the inquiry is received and then when the application is received, both really excellent times, both at the start. But they sort of Actually, sorry, in the inquiry phase, you might have the inquiry is received at the beginning, and maybe there's an inquiry follow-up, or there's this opportunity, a workshop, or you're sending an email with the link to the application that ends that phase. When the application is received versus when the application is approved, also really good times to communicate with your family. So knowing that, that'll really be helpful. Assigning team members also. Instead of you going and adding who is the social worker and then sending them an email, you can enter the assigned social worker for that family's home study, and the system can send an email off to the social worker. Could also update the date that person is assigned as the current date, so that again, your team is doing one data entry point and the system is taking care of communication and some additional data points for you. When you update fields, a lot of times looking at the submission of forms that need to be done. Some specific forms, like the application, may trigger a case stage update. I talked already about assignments that entered that milestone of when that person was assigned. And then also, again, looking for the start and end of case stages to do case stage updates or assignments, things like that, I think are really basic ones that are easy for everybody to understand, especially if these are new to you. And then inserting records. Generally, a record, a sub-record, or what we've called a multi-record. Multi-record. You'll hear me use those terms sort of interchangeably and on a regular basis. They tend to be for history, repeatable things, like a communication, or complex processes that are a sub process of your greater case and your greater service. So I tend to go to the home study because it's very obvious. It's a 3-month process. That's a lot. There's a lot of documentation. There's usually, depending on the size of an agency, 2 or 3 people involved in just that one part of the process. Lots of communication going between your team and the family. It's a process in and of itself. But in my opinion, every background check that you have to do is also its own process. Right? You send information to the family. They send you an authorization back. You tend to update that information into the state databases or the FBI databases. You wait a couple weeks, get that information back, enter data into the systems. Maybe you send a note letting them know the results of those clearances. There's just a lot of steps, and there's a lot of the matching process. Every potential match, every adoption plan, every placement, all of these are really sub processes to the client's greater service that is happening. So you can look to, when you're inserting those records to start that process, look at those as opportunities for auto actions. And then again, it kind of periodic, expiring, timely reporting, things like that. That will help you look for auto actions that will really support your team also. Okay, and then we'll get to this again. I will repeat this, but testing is so incredibly important. And let's go ahead and build some, and then we will talk about them. About testing again. Okay. So auto actions are found under settings and then auto actions. So right at the top, and I don't know if you notice, but I'll just kind of mention at this point in time, under the tools, it's all in alphabetical order. So if you're looking for something, that's, how you can find them. Here under auto actions, what we're looking at here is a list of all the auto actions that are enabled. So these are happening and live in your site. Now, the list can be really lengthy. Mine tends to be kind of short because I leave a lot of the process building to your team. I don't really want the system to do things that you're unaware of. But if you're new to the system, you can always look here to kind of see, if you're a full admin, to see what is going on. And I'm going to talk about these 2 filters at the top. So the action type and filtering by the table. These 2 I use a lot to help me sort of narrow down these auto actions that I'm looking for, especially because these are in alphabetical order, and they are ordered on that naming that may or may not make sense to who's looking at it, right? So if something was built years ago that made sense to the first admin of your database, you may not be able to find that through the name. So, and I will be honest, I haven't figured out exactly what I like as the naming convention yet. I've got a couple different examples here of what the way that I sort of pull things together. I like to see things that are about the application all together, but I did try because to add like case stages to them and a numbering, because inquiry will come after application, even though that happens before. So I don't know what you like, but I think this is cultural. This is sort of like how you'd organize a folder, how you might organize your house, things like that. Like, think about what makes sense to your team. That's the most important thing, is that you can use this. So because the naming convention may be off, I often use these drop-down lists to find all the emails that we send. And I typically look by the action because that's, I think, the way that we think about auto actions is first is what are we doing? What do we want to have done rather than what is causing that action to get done? That sort of seems to come after the fact for us. So I use that one most often. All of these here, then I can click and open it. So this is the, excuse me, I just right clicked, but I can click and open it here. And this is the auto action details screen, that literally the same one that we were looking at in the slide deck. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. The other way that I filter often is based on the table. So because Sam is a system niched in adoption and foster care and really primarily set up to support those services, the table naming generally is in line with what process you're doing at that point in time, right? So I would not look at background checks to get housing information. It's going to be about the clearances that we're doing. That's what's going on. So if that's sort of what you're looking for and what you are trying to see is, does anything exist? That's what you'd pull. I will almost always go to the home study. It is a huge process. So when I pull that, I can see everything that's enabled. Now, with that being said, everything enabled is not everything that's built in the site right now. By default, there are plenty of auto actions that are built, especially if you're new. Hold on a second. If you are a new site, that are built in your system that are not enabled, because we don't tend to send email, like have emails set up for you to go out to your families, because it's just not ready to go yet, not customized with your logos and your messaging and things like that. So over on the sidebar, excuse me, I'm going to need to cough too. On the sidebar here, you can view disabled actions too, or only disabled actions. And just so you can see, disabled auto actions show up in kind of a gray, like a gray. Those that are enabled are still bright so that you can see what the difference is. But you can always go into any of these and decide if you actually want to enable them. Okay, so let's talk about some of these other types. And I'll actually look at, I think before I get started just like building one, because I do want to show you that process, I'm going to look at the three main types so that you can see the differences and kind of what's going on. So let me go back here. I'm going to open this, right click the auto actions list in a new tab. And so I'm going to look at sending an email. So look at that. Actually, let's look at this one. And then we might insert a record. I think I've got that one, and update a field. And well, actually, we can look at an alert also. I don't typically use the alerts, but some agencies actually really, really love them. So, okay, so this first one, just to get you kind of familiar again with what's going on in this screen, because I want you to be comfortable here. The auto action section, I'm not executing this more than once. It is enabled. And this one has a memo. So even letting us know that it's a 3-part series is very helpful to know that I've got other ones. What might also be helpful are the links to the other ones, right? So I don't have to look at that. It's not going to show and be a clickable link if I were to put them in, but just having them there or the task ID would help me get to it a little bit quicker if I needed that. So this is built on a schedule. When it is a schedule is sort of when I'm looking at a specific table. So what is it needing to reference? And it's really referencing, in this case, this date, but it has a lot of additional filters that say, I only care about this expiration date if it's expiring soon, if the adoption's not finalized, the child hasn't arrived home, and the final court date isn't done, like that there is no data entered about the adoption nearing finalization when we no longer need to keep an updated home study, right? That's what's going on. And then we're sending an email. On these auto actions where you're sending an email, you can click advanced options and edit the template to access this message here and change it to, your logo or your preferred messaging, right? Or if something changes, that's how you'll update that. And if I jump to the template, when a template is used on an auto action or multiple, as in this case, those auto actions are linked here. So we can get right back to them. Okay, and we can kind of toggle between. One other thing on this one before I go to looking at another auto action is all of these green pencils will allow you to edit these sections. So I can disable the auto action by clicking here. Could also certainly disable it by this, but I can change the settings here by clicking here. I think I can actually also change them by clicking on the value. I wouldn't say, like in this situation right here, you will have to click the green pencil to change this. Okay, I think this, if I change here, it's going to take me right to that schedule trigger, or I can set it for every Monday instead of Sunday, something like that. Okay. Same for the filters. I can edit here, and then this would say, I don't want to send an auto action or an email, but I'm actually want to add an alert to the site. If that was what you guys preferred. Let's see. Can I click here? I think I can click here. So, actually you might not be able to, even though I am, because there's this alert here that's sort of saying developer only. It may, for your team's admins, you may have to click the pencil to go in here. Let's see. Okay, so this is an update of a field. And the thing that I'd like to call out here is the actions. I mentioned it before, earlier on in this, but you can actually have many updates to many fields here. This is sort of the only time an auto action allows you to take more than one action. And it's really when I'm updating multiple data points is really the only time. I think you can update multiple data points when you're inserting a record as well through an auto action, which is one of the benefits to using an auto action. Here, I might also set that I don't know, somebody, if I have a small agency, I might assign a case coordinator to this case at the same time, right? So it's now in the application stage. We've got the case coordinator labeled all at the same moment when an application is received. Something like that. So you can do multiple things here. And I believe when you go in here and you click update a field, you'll just add fields, right? More fields, and you'll set the specific value. Okay, I'm gonna click off that. This is the email. Oh, this is an alert. So same kind of thing going on is, again, when this field is coming up due or nearing current date, so long as the child arrived home date is empty, we're going to add an alert to the top of the case file. I do not know if I have, but for those folks who don't know what an alert looks like, I'm going to add one manually, which can be done under advanced options, add alert. You set what it is, and you can write a memo that gives you more information on it. And what an alert is, it gives you this really kind of hideous, colorful bar at the top, but it's good in the fact that I don't really love how it looks, and I like it that it really draws my attention that I need to read this while I'm interacting. So if your team is really on a client record a lot, if you're in the system all day long, sort of a thing, you'll see these come up and know what to do, especially if there's a good memo associated with that. You can edit the alert, and you can always delete alerts as well. Okay. And in the case of an auto action that's been sort of drawn to my attention, auto actions do not, the action is never going to be to delete something. You can imagine if it gets set up incorrectly, what kind of nightmare scenario that would be for you and for us to manage. So there's not a delete auto action. So should an alert come up and that situation has been remedied or satisfied, your team will have to go in and delete the alert like I just did. So a couple clicks, easy to do, but it is a part of that task that has to happen. That's the alert. And this one is inserting a background check. So here, the one, I do actually really like this. I think background checks are its own process. Each one for each person is really its own process. Like getting the clearances for the state, the FBI, child abuse, and others, right? Depending on your state is quite the process. And then that same process is repeated for parent 1, parent 2, and people in the home over 13, 14, 17, whatever your rules are. And I actually really like this is when we get, when the home study process is starting, we're going to insert background checks for parent 1 if there's a name in that field, right? That's really all that the filter is saying is check and see, is there somebody in parent 1 first name, and there's a accompanying one for parent 2 first name. Then I'm going to insert a background check. Here, where I talked about having multiple fields. Oops. So I'm clicking here. Taking a second. You might also set it to the background check. Also enter the state, right? The state of this so that you can tell the system, is it a in-state or an out-of-state check that's needing to be done. I'm going to show something here and we'll talk about it a little bit more. This little field here, I want to make sure that you guys see that. How do I annotate? Make sure really see this here, right? Actually clear all drawings. It's really this, very specifically, this little gear icon. Get out of there. That allows me to set it from something else. So this is a list field, and so the system sort of knows, like, I can't pull in a date field here for this as an option, and it's not a text box. I can't just throw in anything. It's very specific to, actually, in this case, it's specific to the state, but I want to pull in the family's state, right? So where did they tell us that they lived? I've got to do a background check for sure for that state. And so I'm setting up sort of multiple things on that background check that label it for us so that my team doesn't have to go in and do that manually, that Sam is really being used as your assistant to go in and do that. Let me see under here. Okay, so I don't think anything below here your team won't have. And I don't even know, honestly, what's beyond that. So I'm going to leave that as, go back to the auto action details. The couple things that I want to talk about here is you can delete it, right? So you can disable it and it can sit in the background and maybe you'll address it and come back to that auto action sometime in the future. But if you know you don't like it, never going to like it, you can also delete the auto action. And then there are modifications and history. So modifications are who made changes and what are those changes to building this setup. So you can look through and it's a list. I would get familiar with modifications reports. There are modifications reports on near every single thing in the system. So it's tracking, who did it, what did they change it from, what did they change it to, things like that. And then the history differs. this is, I don't know that there's going to be anything in here, but this is a report of what, let's see, let me find something, what got done. So let's look at this application one. If I view the history here, this shows me that this auto action was triggered for these families by the different people on these different days and time. Okay, so it's just saying it went off. That's really what it's telling you, and who triggered it. Okay, so both really helpful pieces of information. All right, so let's close all of that. And let's go and create one. So let me actually back up again, because I really like the organization of auto actions. I'm going to keep to a very similar flow. So I'm going to do like inquiry received, and I'm going to update the case stage to inquiry. Okay. Oh, right there. I don't want this to happen more than once, so I'm going to leave it unchecked. And this is fairly clear to me, but you might want to say, you know, inquiries come in through the website, and this will help with data entry. Something to just, again, communicate more of the purpose of that setup. So I think this is a part that gets a little confusing for folks. It's asking the trigger, but we generally say, I want to send an email when. So we speak in English with the action first and then the trigger afterwards. We rarely are going to say when an inquiry, well, I mean, you can say when an inquiry is received, when the inquiry date is entered, I want to send an email. We really say it both ways, but I think a lot of times we talk about action and because we're a doing culture. So what are we doing first? But Sam is asking for that trigger first. So just want you to be mindful of that we're going to, when we're updating a particular date, and we're going to send an email. So the second part that might be a little challenging for you is, well, where is that field and where does it exist? By and large, most things are on the case, or under the case, they might really be on the home study. Again, because that is such a lengthy process, a lot of action items are happening there. However, to note again, because it is a system based around adoption and foster care, the table titles, which are what are displayed here, really fall in line to the type of action or process that's happening within. So there is opportunities to sort of study it. I think coming and hanging out on the webinars is a really great way to learn it. It's also something that's just sort of picked up over time, like tools if we were mechanics or something, right? Like when we first start, there's lots of tools that we don't really know, but over time they become second nature. Same with this of like, where are things located? Because this is sort of what buckets are your fields located in. So for this, on the case is where the inquiry received date lives. So I'm going to choose that date, click on it. And this is where I can say I just want it to be entered, right? It's not empty. I could change this to is greater than 12/31/2020. So everything starting in January, this will happen. I could also here add additional filters that say the services interested in equals foster care adoption. And at that point, we're going to send an email or whatever we're going to do. Well, we're going to be updating the case stage here, but if the interest was in international adoption, basically this action would not take place, is what this means if I leave that filter on. You have the typical filtering options to, is it this, or do both of these things have to exist? And if over here, you also have enabling filter groups. Let me kind of open up that. This really more advanced. I have seen it been used here in both these situations. And I think a lot of times filter groups is probably a little bit much for this section, but your programs can get quite complex. So when it's very specific situations and only then those come into play. So here are all of our action types. So once I've gone through what is going to cause it, then I'm taken to the action type, and the action types can send an email, add an alert, update a field. I can add a checklist section, which are in the checklist configuration in the back. And it would insert a whole section for you. I was trying to think of, there's another way within the checklist that you can add checklist sections. And I was trying to think yesterday of what is a good example. I don't really have a good reason for using this instead, except to say that it's when more complex situations arise, and that auto action only needs to happen. That checklist section only needs to be in sort of like really specific situations. The group prefill, this is an option for sub-records to say, like parent education is a good example, and everyone who starts a home study process with us has to go through this pre-adoption training. So this list of 5 to 10 different parent education sessions, here is the list of those names. You can set up pre-fill groups based on parent education, and it can add them at a certain period of time. And then insert record, we talked about, is like inserting a background check record, or going back to sort of the group prefill would insert a single parent education record. The difference between group prefill and insert record, group prefill is going to insert many records at a time. The downfall to that one is that it must be a list item that's being entered, and only that list item can be entered on that record. So going back to the parent education example, and maybe let me show you just for a sec so that it doesn't feel so far away, if it might. Under parent education, this topic title, think in this site, is a drop-down list. So we might have, all of these ALP learnings are required for our program, let's just say. So all of those would be entered at the same time in a group prefill, but that's the only thing that would be entered through that auto action. The type of training would not. The hours, the potential hours earned would not be entered. That's the kind of thing where an auto action of insert record and having a series of 8 or 10 is going to work out better if you want more pieces of information entered at the same time. The group prefill will only enter one list item for those 8 records that get entered, or however many. So insert record is the one. All right, I am updating the case stage. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. And here I'm basically telling Sam what field I'm now updating. So again, I get another table list. In this situation, I'm doing the case. I'm going to tell it that I want the case stage to be set to inquiry. And then I'm going to press save, because that's the only thing that I want done in this particular auto action. Let's go back and see what other things do I have. Let me pulse the group. I thought I might be able to give you a really exciting one based on checklists, and I still have yet to replicate it successfully, so I can't do that. But maybe if the group wants to ask, are there auto actions that you're looking to have, or do you have any ideas? Hey, Teresa, I see that you've unmuted yourself. Do you have any Thoughts?
Actually, that was probably an accident.
Okay. Well, hi. It's good to see you. And glad you've been able to join.
Yes, I'm really getting a lot out of it. I went on another computer and looked at our auto actions that we already have. And I think from that, we'll be able to come up with other ideas
Hmm.
by the next time, by the next meeting.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. And so we'll talk to that too, kind of what's up and coming here in a minute. Thank you, Teresa. Karen Caspers asked, can auto actions add to a task list? So I think what you mean by that is, can it add a different checklist item to a checklist section? Did I get that right?
I guess so. Now that more people are using SAM in our office, they're asking like if they enter a date for, I don't know, a match, could that add to the task list for the birth parent counselor to request medical records or something like that? But is this more like it's tied to a checklist than just an auto action?
Maybe, but I think to your example, you said a match date, right?
Yeah.
When the match date is entered, that's you could insert a checklist section that has
Okay.
specific checklist items in there that are tasks for them to do. That term task and checklist item is how you will be able to find it primarily if you were looking up Sam's help guides. Because under, let me drop our faces down, checklist configuration here, all of these are checklist items, right? So this is a checklist section in this box, and each of these are checklist items. So the auto action will allow you to insert this entire section here. It cannot insert one of these onto an existing section, one of these being one of the checklist items on there, but this entire section or any of these sections can populate.
Okay.
I was talking about it's sort of redundant functionality, except the auto actions will allow a little bit more complexity. Each of these checklist sections can be triggered from within. So I'm clicking that little gear icon, and this tells the system, or tells Sam, when do we want this section to populate for a record. And so this is on when the case inquiry receive date. I can do that exactly the same through an auto action.
Okay.
What and even I can do here is like, I can put criteria here that says this particular inquiry section is only applicable to our domestic program. And we have a similar inquiry section, checklist section, that's only applicable to the other, to our international program or our foster care program. And that can even be done in criteria here. So I'm saying like it's almost replicated functionality to be able to do this also in auto actions, because I don't have a great example. It's pretty rare when I use auto actions over this, and it may be because this criteria came out later than the auto actions were. So auto actions were sort of a brand, as soon as Sam was ever built, auto actions were in place. Criteria may have been added after the fact.
Okay.
Let me see. Let me check out some of these other. Is anybody else having trouble with me? Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, good. I did a little twisty on my thing. I probably need a whole microphone setup, but try and keep things easy for me. The headphones are very easy. Does anybody have any other things? Would you like to see another example of it being built? I think replicating it. I do have one more thing I want to say, but let me slow down.
I had a question on there, Stephanie.
Yeah.
A little bit further up above. It was right after Karen's comment before your volume was discussed.
Okay. When we would use insert record as an auto action. Okay. So let's talk to that. So insert record is, again, are these sub records, and they're generally multi-record, based off multi-record tables. And you need a multi-record table when you repeat or have the potential to repeat a process. When you have the potential to repeat a process, or you are keeping history, or if the process is really lengthy. So a lot of things within your services, all of everyone who's online today, right? Your services are quite complex. So I'll point out almost all of the tables in SAM are multi-record tables. So fees and expenses, every fee, you can invoice that fee. You can say, I need that fee. You invoice that fee. You collect on that fee. You deposit that fee. Like, there's many processes that are happening for every single fee. So it requires a record to track that information. We can't just dump the application fee on the case. It's generally not enough information that you actually want to collect about that. Same with the home study. I mention it because it's like a 3-month process. Everybody's doing it in preparation for a license, or it needs to be done for the adoption or placement of a child, right? But it's such a long process that you start out with a moment of communicating when the application's been approved or you've received a fee, that sort of time frame right there. That, hey, we're ready to start this, all the way to doing all the visits, collecting all the documentation, writing that, and completing that. So it needs its own record because it is a complex process, and you may only do it once. But for families that are that are providers for years and years, they need to do it annually or biannually. Families that are waiting for adoptive placement for years, they also need to do it generally annually, right? So you need a sub record of the home study in order to collect to track the history of all of the different home studies that were done.
Okay.
Home study, so that's what a record is. So when you insert one, I use it a lot of times to start those processes. Like, the application fee has been received, we're going to insert a home study record so that we can start that. We have a space to start that process.
That would help. Okay.
Same thing like I mentioned, the one about background checks is when the home study process is started, part of that process, another sub process of it, is the background checks. And I need a clearance record, right, for every person in the home. That'll make it easier for me to say. So each one of these background check records, right, has all of these different criminal checks plus that I need to get. We might be recording the date that we entered it into the state system and the date that we received it, so that maybe you have to do advocacy for part of your goals or advocacy for the state to make that process better, or it helps you keep a timeline of when you should expect, right? If they come back 2 or 3 weeks later, that if it's 4 or 5 weeks out and you haven't received that clearance, you can be watching out for that. So there's a whole process between every single one of these. And so inserting a record at the fact that there are 2 people in the home, that their names have been entered, that's helpful, so that your team doesn't have to go and click, right? Your other alternative is to add and say it's for Kim Cooperman, for Oregon. She lived blah, 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 right? The system can do it for you. Okay.
So like another example, I just run this past you is make sure I'm like tracking with this one. So kind of going to your like home study details, like a new home study record could be entered if the case stage is moved to application accepted or home study in our case. Like when that case stage is updated, then it would automatically enter a new home study record.
Yes, you can do that. Now,
Okay.
I'm going to push back on case stage being the
Sure.
trigger. People often,
Okay.
I think it seems simple, but I think I I am going to recommend that dates be used instead
Yeah,
because
that makes
it's
sense.
more
Yeah,
clear. It's
I
more like
gotcha.
exact, yeah.
We don't change the date. We enter it once and it's left alone versus case stage field can get changed all the time. I gotcha.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it could be incidental too, right? Where you're like, oh gosh, I didn't mean it to, I didn't, it could be a data entry error. That's one of the things that, like, if you guys, what I find after a while, right, of if these processes, if auto actions aren't in place where you've solidified a process, reports can have families that are totally been out and done from your program for years and they're still in the application stage. That kind of thing can happen all the time.
Yeah.
Or it can be empty, whatever. So using the auto actions to really solidify your process, I think is really important too.
Okay, that helps. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Let me see. Replicate. So Steve says, and maybe everybody's already read this, we use to replicate entries in different. Yes. Okay. This is a great example, Steve, that I haven't talked about. And I know we're sort of like at time too. Let me see if I can bring this up. So Steve is sort of talking about inserting a record. I don't even know who kids are in this site. We'll go to Maze's record. I think of it for, Steve's got it for monthly reports, right? When a placement's been entered, that there is a monthly report due. I don't even know that I give that in our site because people call monthly reporting different titles. And so if it's not called what you call it, sometimes it's hard to find. But medical exams are a good option. So again, like a medical exam might be due within 30 days of the placement start date. So when the placement start date is entered, we might insert one of these records that have the due date is, plus 30 days. So what would be, what is that? 1/1/2021, something like that from today, right? We could insert that. Generally for, if you decide to use this or like the monthly reporting, auto actions, when the exam is completed, right? We enter this as maybe it was 1/5/2021, right? Because we're not going, nobody's open on the 1st. We would have a second auto action that would insert a new medical exam record that'll be this due date plus 6 months, right? So we're getting it on a schedule. We've started to build a schedule into the site so that this is done by a medical exam is biannual or whatever your rules are, right? And this date is always, the due date is always 6 months from what originated from that placement start date and or this past one because it originated from that start date. And that's what we'll build the schedules for important reporting, like monthly reports that you need to have done. I will try to set up a schedule. I think this concept works best when you do data entry. So it's when I insert the exam completed date, or when I update the exam completed date, I'm going to insert a new medical exam record with due date plus 6 months. But I will see if I can, for next week, do a schedule with a scheduled auto action to insert records. I don't know that I've had success with that. And I am looking for like checklist items complete also. Are there other auto actions that folks have tried, haven't worked out, anything like that anybody wants to mention or talk about?
Hi, it's Kathy Brennan.
Hi.
Yeah, I am having trouble with, I've inherited some auto actions and I'm trying to create more and I'm not getting it to work.
Okay.
So the sending out emails when families' different documentation is about to expire, to remind them, hey, guess what? In 2 months, this is going to expire. Can you work on it?
Mm-hmm.
I guess trying to troubleshoot that is what I need help with.
Gotcha. So having it, and that sort of will go back over here, testing. Create some test records that have that date, right? That date that's going to up and come on you.
Right.
Generally, those expiring auto actions are going to be on a schedule. And let me jump back over to it. Over here, you can click under auto advanced options, run now to run it. So you don't have to wait till next Sunday for this to go out. Okay.
Good. Will it actually send the email, or when I make my test one, I won't have it send an email?
If your test record will work like any other record, so it will send an email. You might do a thing on your auto action to sort of limit it when you're testing by putting a filter of the family ID must equal ABC 1, 2, 3, right? So it's only affecting that one while you're working things through to make sure it's functioning how you want. You also, for sending emails, and I'm going to mention it now, your default email sending settings must work. So the system can't send an email if it doesn't work, right? If your email, so in this moment here, mine on this site are not going to work because there's nothing entered. But you can test by going to this advanced test email sending settings.
Okay. Perfect.
It'll also be very clear that email providers are changing the way that email passwords are. How do I want to say that? How email providers are connecting to other applications like SAM. So what we're finding a lot of times is that we've not even figured out what the pattern is, but you really are going to need to have an app password set up if you're using Gmail or Office 365. Those are the two that we have guides for, because by and large, the majority of folks are using one of those two providers for their email. Having an app password set up for your default email sending settings. Secondarily is all of your users, right? In an auto action that sends an email, you can tell it from whose account are you sending it from. And I do believe you have the option. So we'll definitely do an email one next week. You have the option, I believe, to set it from the default or from a specific person or a specific role. So a role that might be established. This is who is it going to? But then I think, so who is the role being like, it's by the social worker or the case manager or the adoption advisor. The person on that role also needs to have their email sending settings functioning. They need to be functioning, right? And so that could be a potential for those emails to have issues. The other thing I would look at is what the filters are as well.
Great. I'll try those.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And should you have any issues, everybody should definitely remember that you can connect to us through support. So by clicking that here, tell me, this is the issue I'm having. It's very common if by chance you don't give me enough information, whatever, I'll come back and ask questions about it. But it's because I'm curious and need more information to, again, sort of understand the purpose that you're doing if I don't by chance just get it, right? So communicating with us through support. And then, so the default email sending settings. I think that's it. We'll keep to as close to our scheduled time today as possible. Our next week, we're going to get it done. So hopefully today's webinar is sort of like brought some ideas to mind of things that you can do. Next week is like, bring it to the call. We will actually do it in your site, set them up, talk about testing, things like that for an hour or so while we're together to really make it happen in your site. So please don't be shy. Bring what you've got for them. All of our webinars are available, those that are upcoming through December, that's as far as we've gotten so far, on inreachsolutions.com/events. Plus we send out emails generally to the main contact or so. And then, but I think we're really trying to hit all admins. And then all of the webinars can also be found in the support. So let me jump back just so you know where that is. Oops. Right here, you can click help. I'm already logged in, so I've got to go to the site itself, but it's support.inreachsolutions.com. Help is what will get you there. And all of our webinars, even this one starting in the middle of it, will be uploaded here to these sections. So you can decide kind of what are you looking for. Sometimes the video hits multiple points and is in many, and all the videos are here for your team to go in and use as many times as you like. So you'll hear a lot of me. In the meantime, for the rest of the week, enjoy yourselves. Thank you so much. Should you have any questions, you know how to reach me, and I'm glad that you were all able to join today. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.